Well, welcome back to visual programming. So I think just as a recap, we have done quite a bit of task on visual programming. I think we had covered on what we need to do. We had said we're going to focus on HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But of course, JavaScript being our main language, HTML and CSS were primarily to be used for purposes of publishing document and styling them. And of course, I said we're going to use Bootstrap and also Font Awesome and the likes just to make our pages look beautiful. And I think we also went through that. We started looking at JavaScript and we introduced it, and we also saw what JavaScript is capable of doing. And I think we defined variables, and yeah, I think that we also define data types that you can use, and I think we focus primarily on primitive types. That's what we had covered previously. So today, I want us to discuss what we call flow control, which is a very important aspect in any programming language. So our focus for today is going to be on flow control, or control structures as some people call it. So I will launch our Visual Studio Code instance so that you can go on with the code that we were writing. Now, the two classes that are ongoing side by side, so sometimes you might find I'm ahead in one class, but I'll be able to share the content in the same playlist, so you can just go through it in the event that you want to see what the other class had done. But I'm using the same code to be able to see what happens. So I'll open our folder here, open folder or control K0. So, or I can just search it up here, which is uh, visual programming. Uh, More pp. Yeah, this is our directory. So I'm going to close all of this, and today we'll create a new file here, and we'll call it flow control .html. So this flow control is what we want to work on today. Don't worry, sometimes the machine gets a little bit slower when it comes to creating files, so I'll just give it some time. I think it has come. I'll put Emmet, and I'll talk about flow control. So, flow control is basically controlling how the program moves. Ideally, the program is supposed to execute from top to bottom, as we had seen. So, if you're writing our JavaScript files, then you realize that we are executing from top to bottom. So, the program is executing from top to bottom. Now, this way, we are able to get it working from line number one all the way to line number 70, and so forth and so forth. So that's the reason why flow control is important. Now, we don't want the program to work like that sometimes. Well, I think I forgot to share my screen and somebody's reminding me. Thank you very much. Um, yeah, sometimes I tend to forget. Okay, so you're now able to see my screen. Um, Yeah, so Ivan says you can. That's good. That's perfect. So sorry about that. Sometimes I share it on the recorder, and I assume that I've already shared it with you guys. So apologies for that. Now let's just continue. As I was mentioning, when it comes to flow control, it's basically how we want the program to be able to behave. Sometimes we don't want the program to execute from top to bottom. We want it to do other things instead. And that's where flow controls comes in. That's why it's called a program. It's supposed to execute what we want it to execute. Now, we have three flow control methods that we are going to discuss today. Um, the methods are methods, but the implementations could be different. So we'll begin with the first one, which is selection. Then we'll go to iteration. Then we'll go to branching. Those are the three flow control methods that are available for us. Okay, so I'll start by what we call selection. Selection flow control. So what is selection flow control? So selection flow controls basically allows us to execute code based on some condition. So execute some code based on some condition. So every time we don't want to just execute a program from top to bottom. Sometimes you want to execute based on some conditions. Now we have quite a number of implementations as far as selection is concerned. And the first one will be what we call the if then else structures. If else structure. So if then structure. So we have the if then structure. So basically, what it means that we're only going to execute a portion of code if a certain condition is met. Okay, so let me give you a classic example. Let's come back here. Let's create something like inside this page over here. Let's create something like a field where somebody provides their name. So when somebody provides their name, then maybe we can be able to do something over that. So let me assume here that I have um, yeah, I can see I have Bootstrap. So maybe what I could have done is to introduce Bootstrap to this file over here. So I'll simply say link a CSS file, then go to Bootstrap. I put it under what? Bootstrap. Actually, it's CSS. Yeah, I should go to the CSS folder, then pick Bootstrap, the CSS folder, then Bootstrap, like that. That should introduce Bootstrap inside here. Then once I introduce Bootstrap, of course, I also have to include it as the JavaScript file for Bootstrap, which will help it to do other things. So I'm just including the CSS file and the JavaScript file as far as Bootstrap is concerned. And here, let me say I want to do a form group. Just a minute. So I want to create, let me just create first of all a container. Then I want to make it container fluid. Start with a dot container fluid. I'm just trying to give us a real life scenario of how a real UI would look like. Then here, inside this container, I want to have a form group. Inside that form group, I'll have a label. Inside that label, I'll say this is your username. Then I'll ask you to provide a username. And then, of course, I'll provide an input, which is of type text. It will have a username ID, and it will have the classes form control and form control small. These are JavaScript classes. I'll give it the same name, username. Then outside that, I'll put a div with an ID of welcome message like that. So what will happen is then of course here I can put a button next to this. I can put a button next to this. To put a button there, I'll put input group. Then I'll put here a button with a class of button btn. I want it to be green in color, btn success. I want it to be small, btn small. I want to give it an ID, say process. Then of course I'll give it a text that says process. Now this is how you write emmet, and it should be able to fill in everything for you. Then this would actually be inside an input group prepend. So this one is with input dot rather dot input group append. Append means put at the end of it. So this one will be the inside the end, and this one will be what helps you to form the group. So I'm just like trying to put them together. I want to put an input box and a button next to it, so that somebody just clicks on that button, and then when they click on that button, we should be able to output a welcome message inside here on the same. All right, so let's see how the user interface looks like. I'll go live here, and I want to believe everything should be okay. Yeah, everything is actually okay, but I don't like how that button looks like. But yeah, it's okay. So you can type in your username here and press process here. So that is actually okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to Visual Studio Code here, and I'm going to run them side by side so that you're able to see your code window and you're also able to see the user interface. So button, I don't know why. Okay, I didn't put btn independently. That's why. Yeah, now it looks okay. So now you can see it doesn't have that some background it has. So I have a username here and I have a process here. So what would happen is I want that if I press on this button, I want the welcome message to show something like welcome, then it picks the name that you provide over here. That is the if then structure that I'm talking about. So what I'm going to do is, well, I like doing this the way you do it professionally. So what you do here is you'd come to this JavaScript folder, then you create a new file here and you'll say flow control dot js. Flow control, I have introduced an e here that's not supposed to be there. Flow control dot js. So once I have that flow control dot js, I'll just close this window. Then I'll come here and I'll also include that flow control file. So I'll say script source, go to JavaScript folder, then select flow control.js. Now that introduces that file inside here. So every time, every code I write inside here would be able to be attached to this file over here. And ideally, that's how we write it. So that is how we have attached Bootstrap. That's how we're attaching any other script that we might want to write that we want to access from outside our window rather than doing the script here. Yeah, if you do the script here, we said it has several disadvantages because every time I make changes, I have to come and repeat this for all the other pages. It is not very scalable and so forth and so forth. But if I write it as an external file, I just make changes to the external file, and everywhere else the file is included, those changes are automatically reflected. So let's first of all pick this place where you're typing username and pick where we want the welcome message and pick the process button so that you can use the three of them. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to introduce three constants. The first constant will be the username field. So username field, this field over here, because we need to extract its value. So I'll say document dot get element by ID. Then I'll give the ID of the document of the element, which in this case is username, as you can see over here. So I'll pick that. Then I'll introduce another one, which is this process button. So I'll say process button is equals document.get element by ID, get element by ID. Then the ID that I'm getting for that element would be process. Then I'll get the location where we want to output our message. So I'll say message location is equals to document dot get element by ID. Then of course I'll be able to get that location, which is here, welcome message, right? So once I get that, I'll add an event listener to this button. So these ones are going to be inside there. So I will add a listen to button click event. Listen to button click event. So this button click event, I'll simply pick the button here and I'll say add event listener. And the event I'm listening to is click. Then once I run the event listener, I'm going to run this callback function. Okay. Now this callback function, I'm just going to pick now the username that somebody has typed. So I'll declare here username is equals to, I'll pick the variable I defined for the field here, and I'll say dot value. So what it will do is it will essentially, this is value. It will essentially go and pick the value that has been typed here. So value does not have brackets, sorry. That's jQuery dot value like that. So that should be able to give me the value. And of course, before I do anything else, I might want to be able to check if it does something. So I'll use the console.log to check before there's anything else. Of course, I know professionally I don't need to do this because I am already used to it. But for your case, you might want to check if it has some value. Then you say username. So I'll right click this and I'll say inspect. Once I inspect, I'll make sure that I'm at the console. You can expand this a bit. And here, you're going to make sure you're at the console. So it's saying um, bootstrap.min, or it requires jQuery. So I did not include jQuery here. So I need to include jQuery first before bootstrap. So script, JS, and I think I have jQuery. I don't have jQuery here. That's strange. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come here and say jQuery. I'll go to download. I'll download the normal one. No, that's the map. So I just click on this. Right click on this, then you say save as. Then locate where our directory is. So this VP directory here, come here, come to JS, then come to jQuery there. So once you have it there, it will save it. Close that. Then here I'll simply say that, then jQuery. You should be able to see it like that. And I think that should be able to get rid of the error. Yeah, the error is now gone, so we no longer have the error. So I need a jQuery to be able to have that running. Again, you can see that's how you go ahead to fix your program as we move along. So now that we have everything running, what I want to do is, if I typed what this code says is that I have these three variables, this username field, this process field, and where the message is supposed to go down here. I'm not seeing it because it's not there. So then I'm saying if I click on the process button, I will pick the value that is typed here, then I'll output it in the console. So what you need to do is just come and say you want to see the console, then type some name here. If you type blank, you can see the name is blank here. But if I type Richard, you're going to see here it types actually Richard. So that means that actually it is working. So now the only thing I need to do is to comment this one so that it does not execute. So now I want to output the value. I want to put a welcome message here only when you provide your name. So what I'm going to say here is if, and that's why we're talking about a flow control, then I'll say username is not equal to blank. Remember, we had looked at uh, uh, operators, and one of the operators was comparison operator. This is a comparison operator. So it is comparing the value of this and the value of this. So if whatever is stored here is not blank, then I will execute the code that is inside this bracket. So I can simply say here, I'll pick this message location like that. Then I'll say dot in HTML. Remember, we said one of the methods of outputting JavaScript is using in HTML, or you can use document.write. But since I'm targeting to change a particular portion of code, I'll put in HTML. Then I'll tell you what I want you to do. So instead of using a regular string, I would have said here, hello. Then I put a plus. Then I put username. Then I put another plus, and I'll say comma, welcome to JS flow control. So if I did that, then everything should actually be now okay. So I'll just elements, then I'll come back to console. So nothing is selected. So if I don't put a name here and I click on that, you can see this code inside here. Sorry, this code inside here does not execute. So if the name is blank, this code here does not execute because we have said only execute this portion of code if the name is not blank. So if I typed here something like Richard, then I press process. Now you can see it tells me, hello Richard, welcome to flow control. So this portion of code inside here will only execute when this particular condition up here is actually met. And that is what we're referring to as selection. It will only select to execute this portion of code so long as this condition here has been met. This condition does not have to be a single value. It can be as complex as you want it to be because you might be comparing multiple fields for multiple values and so forth and so forth. So that is the first flow control, which is if then structure. So we have If this condition is true, then execute that. It's only that JavaScript is a little bit silent on the then keyword. Otherwise, most programming languages would put something like then here like that. So JavaScript is silent on that. So, but the whole structure is if then. Now that's the first one. The second structure is if then else. The second selection structure is if then else. We have if then else structure. This is the second one. So what it means is it will execute a portion of code if the first condition is met. Otherwise, if that condition is not met, then it will execute the other portion of code. So I can simply come and write that here and put an else here. So you can say I have if then. If then will execute this part, this top part. Otherwise, the else part will execute what is going to be put below here. So if the username is not blank, then it's going to execute the code that we have here. So the code that we had here, if we're going to pick the same message location, like that. Then we say .inner HTML and we'll say, sorry, here we'll simply say, please, please provide your name first. Then maybe we can just move the focus for you so that you don't need to find where to put your name. So I'll pick that field. That's why I was declaring as a variable so that we can be able to use it over and over again. So you can see if I declare it as a variable, I don't have to jump in and out of DOM to be able to access the username field. I can access it from wherever, from inside my code, however I want, because I have picked it and stored it inside a variable. Otherwise, if it was not inside a variable, I would need to repeat this statement over and over again whenever I want to access this field. So again, that is why we define variables, and this is where now they try to show their power. So you can see that now I have two conditions. If the username is not blank, I'm going to execute this code. Otherwise, if the username is blank, then I'm going to execute the code below. So it's going to select which code to execute based on the value of the username. So if I come here and I provide blank, it will tell me please provide your name. If I provide my name as Robert and I click on process, then it will tell me, hello Robert, welcome to flow control. If it is blank, it will tell me, provide your name. So you can see it kind of like, that's kind of like how it works. And this is how actually validation is done as far as JavaScript is concerned. So I think up to that point we're together. So flow control, we have if then, we have if then else, but also we also have what we call nested ifs. So it's possible for you to have nested ifs because you might be testing multiple conditions based on other things. So, for example, I might ask you to be able to provide your name. But if your name is Richard or admin, I'm simply going to tell you, hello admin, welcome. There are some notifications that you might want to look at. If you're not an admin, then probably I just tell you welcome, right? Something like that. So you can see now I have multiple conditions. I have first of all, if the username is blank. If the username is blank, I'll give you a message, please enter your name. Then if the username is not blank, I'll also check, are you an admin? If you're an admin, then I'll perform some other operations. If you're not an admin, I'll perform other operations altogether. So that is what we're referring to as nested ifs. And sometimes, most of the time when you're writing programs, we have a lot of nested ifs. An if inside another if, and so forth and so forth. And that is also another control structure that we use. So let's see how nested if works. So let's assume that this username is an admin. So if they're an admin, we're going to say something different altogether. So if the username is not blank, I can come and put another if condition here. So I'll say if username dot to lowercase, because somebody can type it in any form, is equals to admin, then do this. Otherwise, do this. So maybe if you're an admin, I can redirect you to another page, or I can load other buttons that you can click that other users who are not admins cannot be able to click. So here I'll simply say message.location, this .html, in HTML rather, is equals hello admin is hello admin, and we'll say here you have notifications to check. So you can see if the user is an admin, they're going to get hello admin, you have notifications to check. If they're not an admin, they just get a message, hello, welcome to JS. So if I come here and I don't type, I say process, it'll tell me please provide your name, which means username is blank, it's going to come and execute this portion here. Now if I provide a name like Richard and I say process, well, it says something like username dot lowercase. Lowercase is a method. Yeah, lowercase should work. Mm, okay, to string. Let me convert it to a string first. JavaScript is sometimes very silly. So I say Richard here. Um, lowercase to string. Hmm. Okay, maybe I'll handle this later. Let me just use it case sensitive as it is. Let me use it case sensitive. So if I typed here, Richard, so it will tell me, hello Richard, welcome to JavaScript. But if I typed here admin, you can see it says hello admin. Oh, this is double A. So it should be admin. Um, Username is not equal. Oh, yeah. So it was just taking time to process. I was wondering why it was not showing up because the code looks okay. So you can see if you're an admin, it will tell you, hello admin, you have notifications to check. So this is a nested if. So I have this outside if, then I have this nested if, and inside this if I can have another if, and so forth and so forth. So when you're writing your control structure, as far as if is concerned, there's if then else, there's if then, the else, then there is nested ifs. And of course you can have if then else, there's also if then else if. So for example, let me say I want to grade scores and I want to give you scores that are say between 0 and 39 is E and so forth and so forth. So you can see in that particular case, I can have multiple conditions to check. So another flow control that you'd have as far as selection is concerned is what we call um, if, then, else if, and so forth and so forth. Okay, so you can see there are different structures. This is if then, this is if then else, this is nested if, then this is if then else if, because I might want to check different conditions. A classic example that I want to use here is, let me say that I'm going to give you somewhere to type a score here, then based on the score that you have typed, I can be able to grade. So the grading would look something like this. So let me put the grading here, the grading table. So grading table, and it is 0 to 39 is actually a D, then 40 to 50 is actually a C. My computer starting to become slow. Then 51 to 60 is actually a B, then 61 to 100 is actually an A. So if I was to ask you what is the score that somebody has scored, so depending on what they have scored, I want to give them a grade based on this table. I'll still be able to use if provide that condition, but now what I'm going to do, I'm going to test multiple conditions as I am moving forward. So let's see how to achieve that. So I can just come to my user interface here. I'll change it a bit. I'll put something like um, form group, and I'll ask you to provide max, then max, that the student has scored. Then I'll put an input. Just a moment. Okay. So let's put an input of type text with an ID of max and a class of form control and form control small, like that. Then I have max as the name. So that will give me that input. Well, it's inside I need to put it inside the container. So I need to put it inside this container group, container fluid here, so that it starts properly like the rest. Not yet. Yeah, that's perfect. Those need to come outside. So here I'm going to ask you for max. So you're going to input max, but of course I want there to be an input group. Sorry, it's supposed to be dot input group because it's a div with a class of input group. Okay. Then this input group will have this input inside it. Sorry. Then after that, I'll append a button for processing. So I'll say dot input group append. So this is input group append like that. It's so inside. I need to push it outside a bit. Yeah, somewhere there. Then here now I'll put my button. So I'll put here button with a class of button small. I'll make it red this time, so that's danger. I'll give it an ID of grade. Then I'll give it a text that says grade, like that. So you can see now I have max here and grade. Of course, you can put font awesome icons here if you want to. So I can put something like I for icon, font awesome, solid, font awesome, synchronize, font awesome, large, font awesome, fixed width. So something like that. So that should be able to allow me to input an icon of synchronization over there. I still not finished processing, but I think I just need to refresh it for the changes to take place. I don't have an icon called Font Awesome Sync. Well, I can put plus. So yeah, it means that I've not included Font Awesome inside my file here. So those are the things that sometimes happen to you. So again, I'll come here and link, and this link is CSS file, and I'll go to a folder called CSS, then I'll go to all.css like that. That should be able to incorporate font awesome. So I have not incorporated font awesome, that's why it was not showing. So I want to believe even sync should be there. I'm just trying to show us how to practically create the UI. So as you're creating our UI, yeah, as we're creating our UI, it is able to mimic what we want to have in real time. So again, if I put a max here like say 56, then I say grade, it should be able to give me some score here. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to create another div here, and I'll say is score. Okay. So that div is score. So the score of the student is going to be shown here, or the score that you put is going to be shown here. So I'm going to come back to my JavaScript again. Then I'll declare constants, 3 of them. So the first constant is this max field. So max field is equals to document.getElement by ID. I think we call it max. I don't need to go back and check. Then we have a process or grade button. will be equals to document dot get element by ID, and I can't remember the name for that, so I'll need to come back here and say I called it grade. Then the other one, of course, is score. So grade. Then the score location, score location is equals to document dot get element by ID, and that is score. Then again, our usual habit, we're going to listen to click event, click event of grade button. Okay. Of course, for now we're only listening to click. So we'll take this button, and when somebody clicks on it, so we add an event listener which says click. So when somebody clicks on it, we're going to run the following function. This is a callback function. Then now we are going to say our max is equals to, we're going to pick whatever somebody has typed here, right? Something like, okay, supposed to be like that. This is supposed to be here. So max will be whatever somebody has typed here. So then what we need to do is just to go ahead and check if the user has provided the max. So we simply say if max dot pass integer, which means we want to check if it's a number first of all, and it is greater than 0, then do this. So it means that if whatever we have, actually it should be pass int then in bracket max. So pass int is a function. So if you pass integer, or if you just say number, sorry, if you just say number, then you put the max in bracket. I don't know, my machine is a bit slow today. So if whatever has been typed here is a number and it is greater than 0, then we are going to do that. Otherwise, we're going to tell the user to provide us with the correct number. So you can see now I'm doing an if. So I'll say that location dot inner HTML my machine is a bit too slow. I don't know why. Okay. Is equals to please provide a valid number. So at that point, if somebody types here and they type a number that's not valid like that, well, I don't know why. Score location, that should have actually worked. Grade is grade. I don't have any errors here. So what I can do here is to say console. That's why the console.log is usually very important. Max, not merx, but max. So if I click that, it's actually not processing. So it means that this grade is not the ID. So I'll come here and I'll put button has an ID of grade. Okay, let me say grade max, because sometimes I have another grade maybe elsewhere. Grade max. Then I can simply say here console.log grade has been clicked. Now just to check that actually I'm responding to that button. So you can see this button is not responding, so let me try to refresh it. So this is not getting clicked. Why is that? Grade button is document.get element by ID. Grade max. Okay. Let me copy that. Come here, the button has an ID of grade max. Yeah, why is that strange? Well, sometimes JavaScript fails to reload, so what you can do is you press Control F5 just to make sure that it loads. Then you grade. This is the console window. Um, why is it not loading? That's strange. That's strange, 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 strange. Let me see. Add event listener. Click is the event listener. Then I'm running this function, and regardless of whatever is happening down here, this should have been able to work out. Oh, so I put this one inside the process. I made a mistake and put this one inside the process. So this one is supposed to be outside on its own. That's my mistake. You can see I put it inside the click event of process. So that's wrong logically. So I need to have it outside here. That's why it was not working. So again, sometimes you make mistakes like those ones, and you just come and you fix them as we move along. So now if I click, you can see that now it's actually clicking and it's not telling me those things I need to see. So that was the mistake that I had made. So I will just comment this and I will comment this. But as you can see, if I provide, sorry, if I provide this code and I click this, it will tell me please provide a valid number. Okay, so that at least works. So now the only other thing we need to do is to provide this grading table. So here what you're going to do is we're going to say if max is greater than or equal to 0 and comparison operator max is less than or equal to 39. If that is the case, then we can declare a grade here. So let grade here is that. Then you can say here the grade is E. That's what you agreed, right? Then you have an else if here, else if. Then you're now going to compare the second portion, 45, 40 to 50. So if max is greater than, sorry, if max is greater than or equal to 40 and max is less than or equal to 50, then what do? We simply say grade is equals to C, right? Then I can repeat this else, then just change the values. So what I'm changing here is between 51 and 60. Okay, between 61 and 50, that is a B. Then, of course, in any other circumstance, I'm assuming that you're not going to put more than 100, then the grade is equals to A, isn't it? So once I'm done with that, then I'll simply pick this call location and change it to HTML and say the grade is the grade is, then I'll put my grade. Of course, I have, yeah, like that. So it means that you can say I have if, else if, else if, else. So there's an if, first if, then there's an else if, which I can put another else if condition. Then there's another else if, and I can continue else if, else if, else if. Even though this if, else if is a nested if for this outside if. So it's all about how you're going to structure your code, and that's why we're calling this selection. It will execute a portion of code here depending on some conditions that are going to be prevailing. And I'm trying as much as possible to combine everything that you've learned before, because we have looked at what we call comparison operators. We've also looked at logical operators like and. So and means the two conditions must be met, and so forth and so forth. So with that, we can now come here and not put a max. It will just please provide a grade. And if I put something like 30 and a grade, that's going to be an E. If I put something like a 70, I'm expecting an A. If I put a 50, I'm probably expecting a B or a C, something of the sort. So you can see actually this is now working. So that is selection. And selection is very powerful because most of the time when you're running our code, we will be basing it on selection. And you can take any form that I've put here. You can take if then if it's a very simple structure, if then else if it's only two conditions to be tested, one condition to be tested. If it is true, execute this. If it is false, execute this. Then there's nested if, where I could be testing one condition, then another condition, then another condition, and I'm looking for several things so that once I meet what I want, then I can be able to execute the code as I want to. Then we have if then else if, where now I have the first if, then if there is another condition, then if there's another condition, they are at the same level, but they could be different conditions altogether. That is, and an example I've given is like this grading algorithm. So if the max is between this and this, or this and this, or this and this, you can see it is just one condition, but I'm checking for different values across that condition. So in that case, I'll use if then else if for that structure to work out. Is that clear up to that point? Is it clear up to that point? You can unmute your mic. Okay. Benihin says it's okay. Okay. Evan says it's okay. Good. So now let's look at another selection structure, which is what we call switch. So we have switch as another selection control structure. So this is how selection flow control is done in JavaScript. Remember, selection flow control is um, is um, is a principle. So the principle is selection. Execute code based on some particular condition if they are true. So this is what JavaScript implements. Okay. So if you go to other programming language, yes, you'll find if then else. Actually, you'll find them as they are, but probably maybe the syntax will not be the same. Though in terms of principle, we're going to have the same the same flow controls when it comes to selection. So we have switch. Switch has a single T, not two T's like that. So switch we can is basically one condition, then we want to mesh to check that condition for multiple values. A similar case is, for example, let's talk about a country. We want to ask you which country do you come from. Then we want to check the eligibility of your country. So you see, we only have one condition that we're checking, which is your country, but then that country can have multiple conditions. So if it is Kenya, Uganda, or Tanzania, then most likely you are East African. If you are, or maybe if you are in Kenya, you're eligible. If you're in Uganda, or maybe let's say, for example, we want to give the tax rate. So the tax rate is, if you're in Kenya, VAT is 16%. If you're in Uganda, it's 18%. If you're in Tanzania, it's 17%. So you see, that is one condition, which is country, and based on the country, we can be able to check what kind of tax rate we apply for your case. So that's where switch comes in. I have one condition, but I want to check that condition for different values. Okay, so let's see how that works out. I'm not going to create a UI for that. I'm just going to execute it directly inside here, but I'm just going to output it inside my console so that you're able to see how that works out. Okay, so let's say, for example, I'll jump outside this and I'll say I have a constant here called country, and for now I'll make it Kenya. Well, let me make a user interface so that you're able to see exactly how you work with this. Okay, because sometimes I think when you explain them without UIs, most people don't try to get it. So I'll create a div here with a class of form group. Then I'll have a label here that says country, like that. Then I'll have a select box with an ID of country, a class of form control. It's also going to be small. Small, like that. Well, ID is country, name is country, and this one should be actually inside this div. So let me say select country. It should be inside here, like that. Then inside the country, I can provide a list of the countries that you want to work with. Of course, this one can be coming from the database, but let's just work with countries option. We'll pick Kenya by default. Then we'll pick Uganda, Tanzania. Uganda. And then of course we'll pick option TZ or Tanzania. Like that. So you can see I have my UI over here, which has those three fields, Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. Then of course, here I'll put an input group. Then I'll have input group append. Let's go and put a button here that has an ID of say get tax rate. Get tax rate. It will be a form. No, it's going to not going to be a form but a button. It's going to be a small button. And I'm going to make it gray in color, so that should be secondary. Then I'll put some text there that says get rate, get tax rate. Then I press enter. And the only challenge is I've not placed this one inside this form group, so I'm going to move this select inside this form group like that. So I'll just move these ones inside. Indentation is important for when you're writing your code, so you're able to see how things work out. So now you can see I have that, then I have get tax rates. Of course, outside this form group, I'll have a div where I'm going to say tax rate, something of the sort. So I press enter. So the tax rate is going to show down somewhere here. So what I'm going to do again, come back to my flow control. Outside this, I'll declare three other values. So I'll declare some constants here. Constant country field will be country. That's the query. So this is document dot get element by ID. That will be country. Then get tax rate button. Will be document dot get element by ID. I don't know what you called it. Let me just check. We called it get tax rate. Then we have tax rate field. So tax rate display is equals to document dot get element by ID. That's called tax rate. So now we'll add an event listener to, I don't know why the colors is like that. We have not used them, so they shouldn't have been that color anyway. So I'll pick that, then I'll add an event listener, which is click. Then I will listen to, I'll run the following callback function. So here I'll say const country is equals to, my machine is slower than I can type. I don't know why that is the case. It should be much faster. It should be much faster than I can type. So I'll pick this country field here and I'll pick its value, right? So I'll have the value of the country. Now, depending on the value of the country, now I can be able to apply the appropriate tax rate. So what I can do here, I can simply say switch. Then this is the switch statement. So the key here is the country, which is the value that I want to check. I want to check country, and if the country is equals to Kenya, so what I can do here is I can let VAT rate. So I just declare it without assigning any value, but then here I'll give it a value. So VAT rate is equals to 16. Of course, you have to put break, otherwise it's going to execute the next thing. So if it is Uganda, I'll put a full column. Then I'll say VAT rate is equals to 17. And then of course I'll break like that. Then I'll say case TZ, because remember the value was put as Kenya, Uganda, or TZ. So these are labels. These are the actual values that we're dealing with. Okay. So if it is TZ, then we'll simply say VAT rate is equals to 18. Then of course we'll break. Now, if there is no other condition that we need to check, then what you're going to do is just say default. So the default VAT rate will be 25%. If you're not Kenya, Uganda, or Tanzania, then the VAT rate is 25%. Okay? So that way, it will mean that if you are not a Kenyan, Uganda, or Tanzania, then the VAT rate is going to be 25%. Now, that is that. So once we're done with switch, so I can come and pick now this uh, VAT rate display. Then I change its in HTML. Then I say the tax rate is, then I'll put their VAT rate, something of that sort. So let's come and see. So you can see I could have still used if, but I'm using switch because I'm just explaining that it is an example of one of the crop flow controls that we have as far as selection is concerned. But I could have still used if in this particular case. If the country is Kenya, then VAT rate is 16%. Else, if country is Uganda, then VAT rate is 17%. Else, if a country is TZ, VAT rate is 18%. Else, VAT is 25%, something of the sort, right? So I'll add percent here. So usually when you start with single quotes, you finish with single quotes, even though that will still be able to work out, but I like being um, uh, uh, consistent. So when I come here and I pick Kenya and I say get tax, you can see it is 16%, which is matching what you have had here. If I pick another country like Tanzania, it is 18%. If I pick Uganda, it is 17%. If I go to my user interface and I come here and I add another country, so maybe it's the option, and then I say other, then I say others. Assuming we're working on the East African community and we are working on tax rates that are okay. So if I come here and pick others, you can see the tax rate is now 25%, which is similar to what we have defined over here. Okay? So that is switch. You have one value and you have one variable rather, but you want to check for multiple values. In this case, I have one variable called country, but I want to check for multiple values: Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, or any other country that is there. So it is just one variable, but I'm checking for multiple conditions. So switch can be used for that case as a control structure. Any question up to that point? And I think I'll stop at flow control with that. I'll stop at flow control with that. We can go into another um, um, control structure. Are we okay up to that point? Is there any question? I'm seeing there's something on the chat. Let me see. This was from earlier. Okay. Any question or comment? And I hope I'm not too fast because I need you to understand what's going on here. As we are building our app, these are going to be very important building blocks. Okay. Okay. So yeah, I'm not seeing any mic on. I'm not seeing any question on the chat. Neither am I not seeing a hand raised. So I'm assuming that everything is fine, right? I'm correct, isn't it? Okay. So um, let's look at another control structure as far as programming is concerned, which is called, so this is the first one, selection is the first one. Then we have the second one, which is called iteration. Iteration. Some people call it looping. Some people call it repetition. So you'll get it in any of those names, either iteration, looping, or repetition. They mean more or less the same thing. This is where now we want to be able to execute code repeatedly or a given number of times, either a given number of times or until a condition is met. So it will depend on really what you're trying to program at that particular point. I'll give you a very classic example. Let somebody tells you generate odd numbers from 1 to 30. If someone tells you generate odd numbers from 1 to 30, then output them on the screen. How would you do that? Or they give you maybe say a place where you can simply provide the maximum number. If you put 100, it will generate odd numbers from 1 to 100. If you put 200, odd numbers from 1 to 200, and so forth and so forth. So that's kind of repetition. That's the kind of repetition we're talking about. Okay. So you can repeat it a given number of times or until a condition is met. It will really depend on how you're going to write your code. So I'm going to show us how to do both. Okay. So when it comes to repetition, the implementation in JavaScript is first of all, we have what we call a for loop. So we have a for loop. Sorry. My machine is much slower than I am today. I don't know why that is the case. So we have a for loop. For loop is one of the repetition control structure implementations in JavaScript. So in this particular case, let me assume that you want to generate numbers from 1 to 100 and you want to get only odd numbers. Then let me put here a div for outputting the odd numbers. So I'll say here um, odd numbers, an ID here for odd numbers. So here I'm going to declare a constant odd number location that will document dot get element by ID odd numbers. So here I just want to repeat from 1 to 50, get the odd numbers. How do you get an odd number? It is divisible by 2 and the remainder is 0, right? So it means 1, 3, 5, 7, and so forth and so forth. So if whatever the number is, if I take it and I divide by 2 and the remainder is 0, then that is an even number. Otherwise, if remainder is 1, then that is an odd number. Or I can start at 1, then add 2 to the previous number, right? So that also makes an odd number because if I start at 1, then I add 2, so I'll start with 1, 3, 5, 7, and so forth and so forth. Still, that enables me to be able to get odd numbers. So what I'm trying to say is when it comes to programming, it is how you develop your logic that matters, not really how I'm going to write it, because I would simply say take that number, take the current number, divide by 2. If the remainder is 1, that's an odd number. Somebody says start at 1 and continue adding 2 to the number until you reach what you want to reach. All those two things are still going to give me the exact same solution that I'm looking for. The only thing that's going to be consistent is that I'm going to repeat some certain loop to be able to achieve exactly the same. So that is the case here. So what I'm going to do here, I'll declare here something like I'll say for, then I'll say let I is equals to 1, then I is less than or equal to 50, then increment I by 1 plus plus. So that's how you write a for loop. So for let your start variable, you declare a variable that you give a start value, then you give the condition, which means I should be less than 50, then you give the increment, how you want to increment the I. In this particular case, I want to increment it by 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let a variable here called results. So let results, and I'm not going to assign anything to it. Well, maybe I can assign it a blank, and I can simply say results plus equal. This is assignment operator, and I'm incrementing it. So I'm assigning, so I'm taking whatever is in results, then add this next value. So the next value I'm only going to add if I divide by 2 is equals to 1. So you can see again, I'm using a condition inside here. So when I take I and I divide it by 2 and the remainder is 1, then that is an odd number. So I'll pick I here. Then I'll add a comma because I want to separate numbers by commas, something like that. So this is actually repetition. It's going to repeat I starting at 1, so long as I is less than 50, and then it increments I by 1. Whatever value of I is going to be is going to check if I divided by 2 is equals to 1. So it means 1 divided by 2 is 0 remainder 1. Okay, so 1 is an odd number, so it's going to put 1 and it puts a comma next to it. And it will continue going to 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1 remainder 0, so it skips. So this portion here is not going to execute, and then it's going to continue on and on and on like that until it's done. Now once it is done, then we can now output the results here. So we can come here and say odd number location .html .inner html rather html is equals to results. So that way, when you run our program and refresh it, we should be able to see here numbers 1 to 50. So I'm thinking odd numbers is not labeled properly. So let's come and see. Div with an ID of odd numbers is actually there. Flow control. Okay, I've put it at the top. I shouldn't have put it at the top. I should have put it at the bottom. Yeah. Let me put odd numbers. See if it updates. So I have odd numbers here. I am at the console. There is no error. So what is happening? Because I expected the values to come out of here. So let's go and find out what the issue is. This inner HTML should be capital HTML. So you can see it has generated 1, 2, 3 all the way to 49. So if I change this one to 100, it will generate odd numbers all the way up to 100. So 100 is an odd number, so it's just going to take 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and so forth and so forth. Okay? So that's one way of doing it, but what's important is a for loop, as I've mentioned here. Okay? So the other control structure that we can use is what we call a do while loop. So we have a do while loop. So instead of using a for loop, you can use a do while. So for a do while, what I'm going to do is the principle is the same. For do while, I'll have to start at a number. So I'll say let my counter start at 1. Then I'll say do the following. Then I'll put here my while counter is less than 50. Do there's no bracket. So, but of course here I'll say counter increments. So the thing here is do whatever is inside here while the counter is less than 50. So what I'm going to do is the exact same thing over here. But this time I'm going to use counter, not I. Sorry. I'm going to use counter like that. So that's the structure. So do whatever is inside here while this condition is true. So you can see either I can repeat it a number of times or until a condition is actually met, because this one says do for I starting 1 to 100, incrementing I by 1. Here I'm saying do whatever is inside this block so long as the counter is less than or equal to 50. But I have to reinitialize the counter and I have to increment the counter. So that way I have control over the counter itself. So again, here I could simply mask this off so that now we test the other condition. And it should have worked. Let me just refresh this. Now this is going to be an endless loop because I should be less than 50. So I'll stop it, run it again. Well, that will not run. It's executing, it's taking a lot of memory. So I'll just stop this. I created what we call an endless loop. So long as I is less than 50, then that was creating an endless loop. So sorry, I was supposed to start at stop this. I was to start here. So let's see, why is it not giving me the odd numbers? Results is blank, counter is 1, do, or this should be counter. My bad. You can see sometimes when you make mistakes, it's less than or equal to 50. So you can see it actually works. So it was okay. It's only that I had not replaced the counter here. So that was my mistake. Sometimes when you try to copy code, you make mistakes, especially when it comes to variable. So this, you can see this structure and this structure have actually given me the exact same result, even though they're totally different. Then the last one is what we call a while loop. Uh, while loop. So a while loop is similar to a do while loop. The only thing is that a do while loop will at least execute once. So in a do while loop, at least I have to execute whatever is inside here once. In a while loop, I might not execute anything because the condition might actually be outside. So that's the only difference between the do while loop and the while loop. So the do while loop, at least whatever is inside the loop must execute once. In a while loop, depending on the condition, it may not actually execute. So let me show you how to write this using a while loop. So using a while loop, I'll simply say while, then I'll say counter is less than or equal to 50, do the following. Then I'll pick my code here like that. So it means that this is still going to give me the same results. So counter is 1. So while counter is less than 50, it will continue doing this until counter reaches 50. So when counter reaches 50, it's going to stop. While counter is less than 50. So I need to stop this. I need to run it again. Well, you can see it created what we call an endless loop. So I'll just have to stop that. So let me check. While counter is greater than 50, so while counter is less than or equal to 50, that's what the condition should be. And I do that and I do that. Okay. Yeah, I think that should now be okay. Let's see that. Sorry, should have been here. Stop, run. So you can see I've actually achieved the exact same results using a while loop. So you can see they are basically the exact same thing. It's only the structure that is different as far as they are concerned. Okay, so there are those three control structures when it comes to to iteration, looping, or repetition. You either use a for loop, a do while loop, or a while loop. Awesome. I know that has been actually quite a mouthful. We still have one control structure to handle, which is branching, but I think we can handle that in our next class and see how that works out. So I think I'll give us an opportunity to ask for any questions, or if there are any comments, we can make them. Then we can end the class at this particular point. I believe it is supposed to be between 11 p.m. and 11 a.m. rather and 1 p.m. Is that so? So I'll take a break at that. I'll make sure that I share this video with you so that now, in the event that you want to review anything, you can be able to review it by yourself and see the kind of output that you get. Okay? Any question or comment? Okay, if there's no question or comment, I want to believe that we are okay. So I'll stop the class at that. I will share this video with the class rep. Then you can review it later on in case you need to. So in the next class, we're going to first of all start with the branching control structure, which is not very difficult in JavaScript. Then you're going to look at other topics as we move along. So thank you and have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. Okay, we'll meet again next time.